I've seen such bizarre legal issues over the last few years. I mean, since I've been doing this and people bring this all to my attention, they send me articles and videos and clips and stuff. There was one prominent one that stands out. A couple of years ago, there was a guy in Texas, I think, and during the divorce, his wife wanted to transition the child from a boy to a girl and put him on hormone blockers and get him on estrogen and I don't know, his name was Peter, let's say, and she would call him, Pam when the child was at her house. And he lost the battle and she ended up winning the case. I think he even lost it in Supreme Court, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not sure if you know about this one,
I
but
don't know the case.
she ended up, successfully being able to be the primary caregiver and transition the child from a boy to a girl. And his argument was like, look, here's all the evidence at my house. He's playing with race cars and he dresses up as a boy and he wants me to call him Peter. And it's like, I don't know what's going on over there, but this is insane. Like, this is my child. What are you doing? And the courts like took that right away from him. They turned Peter into Pam.
Yeah, yeah. Those are difficult cases when there are those kind of divisions between the
Yeah, and
parents. But
I
yeah,
mean, you don't have a crystal ball. I mean, you have no idea what you're going to be up against when you get divorced.
yeah,
Chris's follow-up question or statement says, she's on video armed burglarizing my home after she left. District attorney would not prosecute because no jury would convict her in California.
yeah.
Well, that's
It's
the way it
it's
goes.
really remarkable how much bad behavior just gets ignored by family law courts, and they don't refer it to criminal courts when they should.
Is it on
You,
both sides? Is it men and women, or is it fairly equal?
I think there's bad behavior on both sides. I don't know if there are any statistics about what the division is, but sometimes people say, oh well, if someone lies in domestic relations court, they're guilty of perjury.
Hmm.
That's a criminal offense. Well, we asked our local district attorney when was the last time anyone was prosecuted for perjury in a domestic relations case, and they sort of laughed at us. They said, everyone assumes that everyone lies in domestic relations cases, and so they've never prosecuted anyone for that.
I see.
And so there's no quality control. There's not, and you know, um, people complain about the fact that parents lie in court, but then they don't. There are no sanctions for lying, so of
Yeah,
course
well,
people are going to
well,
lie.
if there's no consequences to
Right?
the deception, then of course they're going to do it, right?
Yeah.
Especially if they're rewarded
Right.
with
The lying
financial
successful.
incentives or control of the children. Of course they're going to lie. I mean, you have to see the code in the matrix, guys. Like, there's the entire system, and I'm going to come off as like a MGTOW here right now, but the entire system is rigged against you if you're a guy. The line that my lawyer gave me when I told him that I wanted out was, "You're not going to go to court." And I said to him, "Why?" And he said, "Because you have the penis and you're going to lose." Right? All right. How does this work? Break it down for me. And after a 2.5 hour call, it was like, I basically I just looked at the phone and I was like, I'm fucked. Like,
Yeah.
I didn't know what to do with all that information. But that's why I've got Dawn on here for you. That's why we're showing you what the better states are versus the worst states. You can at least, it's a slaughterhouse. You can at least, if you're going to do it, march into it with your eyes wide open and hopefully make some better decisions and choices. What else you got for us, Don?
Well, one of the things you want to talk about is what people can do.
Yeah.
And I do want to underscore that, you know, I've always told fathers going through this that you have three jobs here, and you have to keep all three jobs in mind, but you have to keep the priority ranking in order. The first job is to be the best parent you can be to your children within whatever constraints the courts have imposed on you. So if it's an unjustified requirement that visitation be supervised, still that's not your kid's fault. And you be the best dad you can to your kids, even if the constraints are really unfair. Don't let the injury that's been done to you bleed over into the way you're relating to your children. That's the first job. The second job, but it's ranked after the first job, is to work as hard as you can to get the arrangement with your children to be as good as possible. And that's what the previous questioner said about spending 3 years and $120,000. That was working to get the best outcome. That's vitally important, but don't be working on briefs and things like that when you got your kids with you, and you could be out, throwing the baseball with your kids or something like that. If you're deprived of parenting time, you got plenty of time to focus on your case when the kids aren't around. The third job, and this is the one that so many fathers forget, is to change the system so this doesn't keep on happening to people, right? And those of us who didn't get broken by the system but see how flawed the system is ought to be working to change the system. And so one thing you can do, and this doesn't solve your case, but it might solve your children's case later on, if they're unfortunate enough to go through the divorce system, is to work to change the system. But there are things you can do to put yourself in the best position you can be in when you divorce. And I always tell people it's like you're playing football on a slanted football field. That's what bias is. It's a slant. There's a bias against fathers. It's well known. It's demonstrable. I had attorneys say to me, I like to represent mothers because I like to win, but I like to represent fathers because I like to get paid. So there is a bias, but that means there's a slant. It doesn't mean you can't win. It means you have to work harder and smarter. By the way, it also doesn't mean that if you do work hard and smart, you're guaranteed to win. I'm not suggesting that. But you can increase your chances of getting the best outcome for you and your children by working hard and working smart. And one of the things that's important to do is to not let your emotions control you, especially in court. When women are confronted with an injustice, with a threat to their most precious relationship, they're likely to cry. And that evokes feelings of sympathy in male judges, in female judges. Right? If a man cries, it often evokes concern about whether this guy's stable or not. The way that many men respond to threats to a relationship that they value is with anger. And anger is counterproductive in the court system.
Yeah, you really got to cool your jets and stuff like
because
this.
You look like, oh, maybe you're dangerous, maybe this guy isn't safe, etc. So you got to keep a cool head. You got to let the facts do the heavy lifting. You've got to lead with what's best for your children, and not whether you're being victimized or not. You got to say, look, I love my children. I'm involved with my children. My children need me to be involved with them and not to be a weekend visitor. But you need to provide the evidence for that. And I guess this is obvious in a way, but I've seen so many fathers either fall into the trap of getting angry and yelling in court, or not really focusing on making their argument in terms of what's best for the children. I should say, I wrote a paper in 1999 that argued that parental rights were fundamental constitutional rights in the U.S. And that family law courts routinely violate those fundamental constitutional rights. And I have often had parents come to me and say, I would like you to write a brief supporting this in my court case, or I'd like you to testify. And I tell them, I absolutely believe every word I wrote in that paper, but that's not the argument that wins in family law cases. Going in there and arguing, I have a right to this, and how dare you challenge these rights, that doesn't win. And your first job is to try to win the best outcome you can for your kids. And what that means is showing the court that this is best for your kids to have equal parenting. I don't mean you don't have that right, just that's not the leading argument.
Are there any other things that men should contemplate before they get married, or things that they should contemplate as they're perhaps married? Like, would it make sense, let's say, if a marriage is on the rocks and you live in a difficult state, to move the family to a father-friendly state?
It might. That's a heavy lift to do that, and is with no guarantee of success. You'd have to establish residency in the state. I think it varies by states, but you have to be residency probably 6 months in the state to do that. So it wouldn't be as if a quick move would do it. Sometimes people talk about prenups. Prenups can apply to the division of property and to other things like alimony and stuff, but they absolutely don't apply to custody. There won't. Courts won't even consider. There are people who have written prenups. Should the marriage break up, we will both retain custody. Courts won't even look at that.
I know
They
that the
throw it.
American legal system is slightly different from the Canadian one, but we have a concept here called fraudulent conveyance,
Uh,
and what that really just means is, if you took 100 grand worth of credit on your credit cards, and you transferred the title of your house into your wife's name as you were racking up the debt with the intention of never paying it and
mhm.
filing for bankruptcy, then uh, th- then a court could basically turn back the clock on that change of the title and put it back in your name, and then the creditor could sue you and take, like, is there such a thing as fraudulent conveyance in the United States
I
or
don't know,
something
but I
like
think
that?
there is.
Okay.
I believe there is, but I don't know.
What else would guys want to contemplate as they're going through this process so they can minimize the damage to their kids, minimize the damage to their wealth, things like that.
So, one thing that is counterproductive is to try to hide assets, um, because those are usually discovered, and then you've lost credibility with the court.
Hmm.
Um, I think, excuse me, I think that it's mostly important, really, to be as involved a father as you can be, consistent with providing and so forth for your family,
Hmm.
and then to be able to show that to the court. Um, Although I've had attorneys say to me that there are a number of factors in deciding any case. There's the statute, and there's case law, and there are the facts of the case, and there's the decision maker, the judge or the magistrate in the case. And the most important is the judge or magistrate, um, because they have their own biases. I've seen gender biases work against mothers as well. I've seen usually older male judges who say, well, dad's remarried and his wife is going to stay at home. His new wife is going to stay at home. And I think kids should have a stay at home mom. So I'm going to give custody to dad because mom has to work now. They're separated. She's not remarried, so forth. And so mom suddenly gets cut out. Because that doesn't happen very often, but I've seen that kind of bias as well. Um, so,
That's interesting.
yeah. Um, what else? There was something else I wanted to say as a strategy here. First of all, if you can avoid court, avoid it. If there's Sometimes people talk about how it takes two to tango, but it only takes one to drag the other person out onto the dance floor, right? But if you can um, convince the other parent that you're going to spend enormous sums of money to battle this out in court, and it would be much better to mediate these issues, then do that. And if you can mediate a bunch of issues and only have a few that you have to go to court, that'll cut down the expenses as well.
Mm.
So that's another thing that mediation will help with
Uh,
these things.
Don, Tony's got
Uh,
a note there. Can you talk a bit about the structure of the Title IVD program and how
sure,
it drives government incentives to stop shared
sure.
parenting?
I wish I could say it's a simple story, but it's rather complicated. Um, the, uh, the the federal government reimburses the states for 66%, for two-thirds of their administrative costs in running a child support system. That's not a windfall to the state, but it compensates them for two-thirds of this. The state doesn't make money from that.
Hmm.
Um, I've heard fathers complain that the, 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 the Title 4D thing encourages states to have high child support obligations. I think that's actually true, but the story is more complicated than most fathers realize. Um, there are five incentive factors that the federal government uses to reward states for doing things it's trying to encourage them to do. Several of those don't have anything to do with the size of a child support award. So, for example, one of the factors is the percent of cases in which paternity is identified. Another factor is the percent of cases in which a child support order is issued. That then doesn't have anything to do with the amount of the child support. One of the factors is the program efficiency. And program efficiency is measured by the quantity of child support collected and distributed divided by the administrative cost. Well, if you collect more child support from each obligor, the amount of money you collect goes up, but the administrative cost doesn't, because it doesn't cost any more to enforce a child support obligation for $500 a month as it does to $300 a month. So that does encourage states to have larger child support obligations. But the main driving factor is this: how much of this incentive money the state gets depends upon a base amount that the child support system produces, and that is based directly on how much child support they collect. Mm-hmm. So, for example, in 2019, California collected $4 billion in child support. Now, California is it's the biggest state by population. It's the biggest economy in the country. It's much higher than most other states, but it's not higher than Texas. Texas's base was $7.2 billion. It's a smaller state in population. It's smaller in its economy, but it had higher child support collections. And what that means is that even if Texas and California are doing equally well on all these performance measures, Texas will get about twice as much federal subsidy dollars as California will. And so that is an encouragement for states to set their child support obligations higher and to collect more child support.
Okay. I got some people waiting to hop in and ask some questions. Where do you see this going in the next 10, 15, 20 years? Like, do you see this improving for fathers? Like, what's the trend?
I certainly think so. I said that it's frustrating for people in this movement because there are many people that just give up. I mean, they feel like they're hitting their head against a brick wall and nothing's happening. Mm-hmm. But as I said earlier, the winds are inconstant, but they're blowing only in one direction. I mean, the changes have all been improvements. And we have now pending shared parenting legislation. They're in 23 different states. There are 40 different bills, and there will be new ones introduced in this legislative session that many states are going into right now. Many of those are to establish a legal presumption of 50-50 parenting time. We've had near misses in a number of states. In Florida, they passed equal shared parenting legislation pretty strongly in both chambers of the legislature, but then the governor vetoed it. In Missouri, we had equal shared parenting legislation pass overwhelmingly in the House, and then it got held up on the Senate floor because really of a political pissing match between two senators. It had really nothing to do with the merits of the bill, but one of them was just, not going to let the other one move any legislation. So we've had a number of near misses, and near misses are frustrating, but they indicate that a hit might be coming soon. Mm-hmm. I think there are going to be a number of states. I hope Ohio is one of them that pass equal shared parenting legislation in the next few years. And I think this is something that'll snowball. Because there's a generational aspect to it. We have overwhelming support for shared parenting across the age groups, but you talk to younger people, and their view is, well, of course that's the way you should do it, mm-hmm. Because the patterns of parenting have changed. We may have never really been in the Ozzie and Harriet, father knows best world. That might have always been a bit of an exaggeration of the situation, but most families are dual income families, and in 1/3 of dual income families, the mother earns more than the father. Mm. And so, women have careers, and men are taking on more of the hands-on care of children, and everyone is just, most people are just coming to see, well, this is the way separated parenting should happen. So I really think it is going to change. Can't say when it's going to change in any given state because these idiosyncratic things pop up and block it. But there is a distinct direction to the movement.
Let me ask you a quick question before I pull these guys in. I'm doing some consulting right now on a new startup business, and one of the recommendations that we were tossing around was taking a small percentage of the profits in the business towards a social cause. And I was going to recommend, something that advances or furthers the plight of fathers fighting to try to get custody of their kids. Is there a nonprofit? Is there an organization that stands out as one of the best ones out there?
Well, we think National Parents Organization is a great organization. We have a number of corporations that have some usually with matching funds from because we have a supporter who contributes to NPO and then their corporation matches it. We
Okay.
have a number of companies that have made contributions to NPO and some family foundations that have done so as well. In Canada, I know there are some organizations, and I'm sorry, I'm just not
It's actually
remembering.
a U.S. organization, so it would be in the
Okay,
United States.
yeah. So you know, we think, and I don't think this is just institutional bias on my part, we think the National Parents Organization is
Okay.
the largest and most effective shared parenting organization in the country. We were directly responsible for the great success in Kentucky, which has served as a model for other legislation. And we worked with a state organization in Arkansas.
Hmm.
We're working with some state organizations in other states, Connecticut, I'm sorry, and Wisconsin as well. Um, and one thing one thing that's given me real hope of change is that the various shared parenting organizations are um, working in greater coordination than they had in the past. There used to be much more conflict between organizations about which organization gets credit for something, or and there were times when one organization would fight against legislation, good legislation from a different organization. Um, that seems to me to have gone, and people are now recognizing that what matters is getting the legislation passed.
Mm.